Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, July 18th, 2018. That's 2 18s. So, as you know, that means time to go out and buy a lottery ticket so we can buy our way out of this mess. I hope. Maybe we can win $1 billion and then the President of the United States, whoever it may be at that time, will take us seriously. I don't know. Maybe that's our only method of escape. I'm fleeing to... I've added Iceland to the list of countries that I'm considering fleeing to when the time comes. I don't think I can swim all the way there, though, so it might become somewhat difficult. Anyway, still missing my vacation out there. Plenty to catch up on today, and today will be the first opportunity that we have for both Greg and hopefully Joan to join us live and discuss the fact that the president has been engaged in treason for the last couple of years, but really admitted to it the other day, although he has come back and I guess the White House is claiming he corrected the record. Oh, I misspoke. I accidentally said I am a traitor, and I meant to say I am not a traitor, and I left that out, and I don't see why people are making a big deal out of this slip-up. And, who knows what. Apparently Newt Gingrich is pleased by this thing. He had, a terrible review of his press conference performance post-Helsinki employee review. And then I guess he made his statement about, I said would when I meant wouldn't, or wouldn't when I meant would, or whatever the correction was, and now everything is fine. And I guess it doesn't take much to please Newt Gingrich, and nobody should give any particular weight to that, but it's out there and it's happening. And he's buzzing along happily this morning, claiming to have created 14 umpteen whatever billion, bazillion, gazillion jobs, and everything is great, along with doubling and tripling the GDP. So, everything's humming along fantastically here. By the way, it's actually, I think, I tweeted this morning that it's becoming increasingly clear that I think part of the discussion with Putin was, I don't know how explicit they were, but it seems to be emerging from the statements about what's going on and things that Putin is saying about what was discussed in the meeting. And that's one of the major problems with not allowing anybody from the American side to monitor what was going on is they come out of the meetings and Putin can simply say, we agreed, like we discussed yesterday, to complete political union between the United States and Russia. We are going to absorb the United States, beginning with Alaska, and then just move across. Never mind that it's not contiguous. We're going to take that strip of Canada as well. The Americans agreed to it, and they're going to be surrendering on August 1st. And you would have no way of saying, no, we didn't say that. That's outrageous. Other than simply saying, well, it's my word against Putin. Who are you going to believe? And I'm not 100% sure how to come down on that one. But I think I prefer the outcome where the United States remains independent. But we don't know. We don't know what was agreed to. What's becoming apparent, though, is that there was at least some discussion of something along the lines of Putin issuing a list or creating a list, or I don't know how he did it mechanically. But he appears to have given Trump a list of people that he thinks that the American authorities ought to essentially round up for him and deliver to Russia for, some sort of special treatment or another. Or in some cases, elimination, I would assume, and in some cases, imprisonment. And in some cases, just a little rough questioning to see whether we can discover the truth about what actually happened here. And among them, by the way, not troubling at all, the former ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, who's apparently caught wind of this idea that he should be delivered to the Russians for questioning with respect to the origins of and provenance of the Magnitsky Act, which has hurt the Russian oligarchs so much and created such problems for them, and they've wanted these sanctions lifted and this act repealed since forever. There was the whole idea that we could somehow conflate it with Russian adoptions, so that by way of excusing the now infamous Trump Tower collusion meeting with Don Jr., etc. But this is something they've been after for a long time, and they've sent several agents asking after it, and now I guess they're emboldened to the point where they think, the United States should give up their own former ambassador, who would otherwise ordinarily enjoy diplomatic immunity from almost any prosecution of any kind for any act of any kind, should be handed over to the Russians for questioning and, disposal, if necessary, because he wants to know, what was it? I need your confession about how you faked up the fact pattern for the Magnitsky Act so you could frame me and my oligarchs in the eyes of the Western powers. And I have no idea whether that's something Trump would think he could do. He can't do it. I mean, under normal circumstances. No, out of the question. Not only would that not be contemplated, but it would be treason by itself to contemplate doing it. But, Trump doesn't play by those rules. I don't understand law, so it doesn't matter, and I can do whatever I want. I saw it on TV. The president's the most powerful person in the world, so I can do things this way. And the only people who, I guess, could convincingly tell him that he can't by joining in a decision that makes it impossible for him to continue as president would be Republicans in Congress. And guess what? They're not very inclined to do any of that. However, lots of other stories that we need to round up and catch up on all the various threads that lead to pretty much the same conclusion. Greg Dworkin, your turn. Welcome back. Been a little treason since you've been away.
Yeah, well, I have to tell your listeners before we start that David and I had a long talk, maybe 2 hours or so. The only people in the room are the translators. Yes, but if I tell you what we talked about, we'll have to kill all of you.
Yes, or more to the point, I will have to let the Russians kill you and look the other way when they do.
Yeah, well, that could happen. Maybe that's already happened.
That's right. If you have any stairs in your building, don't fall down them, and
right.
Stay away from the windows.
I'd be very careful about balconies from this point on.
Right. I would say that's probably a good idea. And but if they do it, what can we do? They're Russians. They don't. They're not subject to our laws. I can't help you.
Yeah. Well, the fallout from what happened the past couple of days is pretty amazing. And again, just to sum up, Trump, against all advice from all experts, goes to Helsinki after trashing NATO and sells out to the Russians and appears weak on stage, and then comes back and gets hammered by Fox News and conservative outlets, and he's really astounded by it, then upset by it, then just totally angry by it, and forced by his aides to do a little bit of a walk back, which he doesn't want to do. It's one of those, I'm reading from the piece of paper, and I'm going to ad-lib from the paper. I hate doing this. You're making me do this, but I'll do it. And he does it badly. And then by last night, walks back the walk back. And then this morning, here's a report from Daily Beast, for example. Trump tanks his own Putin walk back during one of the worst moments of his presidency. And the subheading here is by Lachlan Markay and Aswin Subsang. If Trump's explanation for why he botched his Putin press conference didn't sound believable, it's a reason. He didn't buy it. So it's a story about how his aides forced him to do it because they know they're getting hammered. And if you look at the major paper headlines today, the Post, the Times, all of them are Republicans don't know what to do. Yeah. Republicans, maybe the dam is breaking. Maybe criticism from all sides is continuing. It continues to be a firestorm. What they mean when they say they don't know what to do is that political gravity has not been repealed. If Republicans defend Trump, they alienate moderates and swing voters and independents. And if they don't defend the president, then they alienate the base. You can't satisfy both constituencies at the same time. And that's why they don't know what to do.
Oh.
They would know what to do in regard to, well, policy and stuff like that. But that's not their concern.
Really?
Their concern is self-preservation, as all politicians are. I mean, that's not a knock on either party. It is, but I mean, that's politics. Their first job is to get reelected. So you have a November election coming. Right now, 538 has the generic ballot 9 points in favor of the Democrats. It looks like the Republicans have an awfully good shot of losing the House. G. Elliott Morris's model now has 75% chance of the Democrats winning the House, and he doesn't have a model, but he says his own off-the-cuff estimates, back-of-the-envelope estimates, are maybe 25% chance for the Democrats to take the Senate, but 75 in the House, although Trump's trying to make that 25% higher and higher.
Okay.
So they're concerned about that, and that's their focus. And it's so bad that terse Mitch McConnell first had to say Russians aren't our friend, and then the next day he was forced to say, again, this is not stuff they want to do. It's stuff they feel like they have to do based on the phone calls they get from their constituencies and what their donors say. And the next day he says, Republicans may have to get together and do more sanctions. And Russia, be on notice. We know what you did in 2016, and we will not allow you to do that in 2018. Of course, my opinion is, Mitch, we know what you did in 2016, and we're not going to allow you to do it in 2018. But be that as it may, the pressure is real, and all of the D.C. journalists who initially said, well, it's just like Access Hollywood, nothing will change, of course, are wrong. It's just as bad a political crisis, although it may not be the end of Trump, but it's just as bad a political crisis as the Charlottesville reaction was. It doesn't go away just because you decided to change the topic. They're not changing the topic. Like the baby jails, which had a week's worth of coverage, still gets covered a little bit, but not the way it was. But that week's worth of coverage wasn't going to be diverted because Trump had a tweet. And the same thing is true here. This is going to go on for at least a few more days. And in this 2018 era of social media, having a 3 or 4 day news cycle is just brutal and speaks to the depth of the problem that Trump is having. So what does he do? He gets this guy from Fox News, Bill Shine, who everybody agrees may or may not be good at his job, but certainly has a good relationship with Trump. So somebody, Kellyanne Conway or Bill Shine or some of the professional liars that they hire, have talked him into at least saying that when I said I would, I meant I wouldn't. And that one word thing, I mean, they get paid gazillion dollars to come up with it in 24 hours worth of thinking. And they come up with this frame that, okay, the only thing wrong was this one word change that we're going to make. We accidentally misspoke.
Yeah.
Mark Murray points out. I mean, that was a terrible job of spin is what I'm trying to say. And Mark Murray from NBC Politics writes, if Tuesday was supposed to be a cleanup job for Trump, he picked up a single empty can but left all the other garbage on the floor. Here's everything else he didn't try to fix from Helsinki. I hold both countries responsible for the decline in U.S.-Russian relations. I think that the U.S. has been foolish. I think we've all been foolish. Here's another. I think that the Mueller probe is a disaster for our country. I think it's kept us apart. It's kept us separated. There was no collusion at all. Everybody knows it. The fun part is when he gave his speech, of course, reading from his notes, he took a Sharpie and wrote no collusion.
Yes.
In big block letters.
Those are the other letters he knows.
But the whole idea was I got to remember to say this. No collusion. Right. No, puppet, you're the puppet. You have groups that are wondering why the FBI never took the DNC server. Why haven't they taken the server? Why was the FBI told to leave the office of the Democratic National Committee? I've been wondering that. Now, you have to understand, this is all part of a conspiracy theory on Reddit and places like that, and that's why he keeps referring to it. There's no one server. It's a class. Like, I want Amazon server.
Okay, here.
Right here.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like you can hold in your hands. That's not how it works. It's not how the Internet works. It's not a series of tubes, But the idea is, in the dark reaches of conspiracy land, that if you looked at the server, the evidence there would show that Seth Rich was the person who accessed this stuff and then released it. In other words, it really wasn't Russians who stole all this stuff. It was an inside job from people who wanted to stop Clinton because they knew about her Pizzagate ring.
Yes.
That's why he's so fixated on this whole server idea. It's a whole long article I published
Wow.
on the Pundit Roundup today from Politico talking about the actual how does the server thing work. What Mueller knows about the DNC hack and Trump doesn't, but it's not a technical thing. It's got nothing to do with the technical fact that there is no server. It has everything to do with the fact that what he is trying to do is follow the conspiracy theory that says it's all Clinton's fault because, it's never his fault.
No.
Then Mark Murray points out, what happened to Hillary Clinton's emails? 33,000 emails gone, just gone. He said this Monday at Helsinki. I think in Russia they wouldn't be gone so easy. I think it's a disgrace. We can't get Hillary Clinton's 33,000 emails. So he's still fixated on that and Clinton and Obama and this and that and everything else. He also said, so I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I'll tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
Strong. Love strong.
Strong people. I love strong people. Again, that goes to what we were talking about Monday. His whole view of countries is they're really companies, and he just likes to be able to talk to his CEO and not have to worry about all this messy, legal council and senates and houses and dumas and all these other things that interfere with their great one-on-one relation. And then he said, and what Putin did is an incredible offer. He offered, I'm not exactly sure what he offered, but you were talking about that.
Yeah, I don't know what he
to get
offered.
everybody over there that he doesn't like Bill Browder, brought to him so he could administer Russian-style justice.
I'll fix him.
I'll fix him.
Yeah.
So, you can't walk that back with I meant the different word.
You could, sure you can. Just go do it. I mean,
the way that won't work, right?
Yeah,
I found around it this morning. Is it treason? Why would it be? Oh, I meant why wouldn't it be? And the T word is just Peter Baker in the New York Times. Critics of Trump have a new word in their vocabulary: treason. Max Boot wrote a piece about that. I'm trying to remember the ex CIA guy who was talking about treason. It's a word that's being used multiple times by center-right sort of people.
Yeah.
And it's to the point where, to the consternation of the New York Times, Peter Baker has this whole story about it where he used the word that, or the line that treason has become so ubiquitous, it's not even just the fringe groups and the liberal radio show hosts or talk show hosts who are using the word now.
Yes,
Which,
it's everywhere.
New York Times bias. I mean, fringe groups to them include the Democratic Party.
Yes.
Hillary Clinton voters. By the way, the Times had yet another story of finding Trump voters, asking them about how they felt about all of this.
Oh yeah. Oh well, that's good. I'm glad. You got to have something going on in the diner.
No, it was a Pennsylvania bar in the middle of Pennsylvania, in the Pennsylvania part of Pennsylvania. But the idea that you still go back and ask Trump voters if you're still voting for Trump has become a caricature at this point. You don't ask anybody else.
Right. Why would you?
You just ask them. But the Times is going to be shocked about what happens in November.
Maybe.
They didn't ask anybody about it.
Or they consider maybe they're looking for subscribers. Well,
I suppose.
I could subscribe to the New York Times here in Pennsylvania.
Sure. You could.
The guy was in here before. He was a nice fella.
Comment about that. He said, the New York Times will get you the important stories about Midwestern diner goers who like how Trump handled Putin. Unfortunately, most Times reporters are currently busy covering Alan Dershowitz on Martha's Vineyard, so there might be some delays. But they found somebody, and they sent him, and he went to Pennsylvania, and he found all that stuff.
Yes.
I mean, what this all gets down to is that people just keep dancing around the fact that they're trying to figure out why would Trump do this and why would Trump do that. And the fact that Trump is just out and out compromised is something that they can't wrap their heads around, or their editors won't let them.
Yeah. Or, if they're very forward-thinking publications, they write, we can't get our heads around the fact that this might have happened. And everybody says, see, they're acknowledging it. But then they drop it. Like, okay, well, you can't get your head around it.
Well, you got to be fair. Let's go find some Trump voters in Pennsylvania. Julia Ioffe writing in GQ. Now we all know what Putin has on Trump.
Oh?
What Putin has on Trump. Yes, Putin has something on Trump. He helped him win.
Yeah.
That's the compromise.
Well,
Facing the press after his meeting with Trump, Putin admitted openly, arrogantly, that yes, he wanted Trump to win in 2016. But we had known that as early as 2016. His state-run media didn't do much to hide their boss's preference, anyone but Hillary Clinton. I remember constantly explaining that summer why Putin preferred Trump to Clinton. Through the spring of 2016, Kremlin TV was clear it wasn't that Putin wanted Trump to win, it's that he wanted Clinton to lose. The propaganda machine, and as we now know, its covert influence machine, got behind Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, Jill Stein, anybody who wasn't Clinton.
Yeah.
And that was the goal to make sure that Clinton wasn't there because Clinton was pretty tough on sanctions and Putin hated her.
Yeah. That's
got her own
it.
flaws. I mean, she wasn't the greatest candidate. She didn't win the election, yada, yada, yada. But there was no question that the Russians had a goal. It was to make sure she wasn't president. And as a result, it was a win-win for them. They didn't get Clinton and they got Trump.
Right, and it was worth the risk, even if a long shot, if they really thought there was no chance they were actually going to be able to change the outcome of the election. It was, a couple of bucks invested. It wasn't a huge investment. They weren't invading or taking any steps that couldn't be undone. And at best, they get a few people named in indictments for hacking computers in the United States and say, yeah, we're not delivering them to you for prosecution. And I guess that's as far as they thought it would go. I don't know if they anticipated this sort of investigation. And I imagine that if Hillary Clinton had won, there simply wouldn't be this level of investigation. So I don't know that they anticipated Trump winning and there being an investigation. But if they did, they probably also envisioned I'm sure over in Russia they thought, well, the president can effectively shut down such an investigation. He's the president. They're about as deluded as about what the president can do as Trump is, I think.
Yeah, well, they didn't really expect him to win because nobody expected him to win. But at the same time, they were prepared for that eventuality. And what they were also planning, obviously, was disruption and propaganda against President Clinton had she won.
Yes.
Now, the break is coming up, and I'm going to leave the NRA Trump spy stuff. Not Trump spy, Russian spy. What's the difference? Trump, Russia, same guy. Yeah. We'll leave that for after the break. But I did want to get this in beforehand, and this is James Bowie writing in Slate.
Okay.
Which he's done. He's in specific. He's talking about a Matt Iglesias tweet. Iglesias writes, "There's been a lot of mostly wrong-headed second guessing of Democrats' pro-immigration positions.
Oh,
but there's more evidence that they were hurt in 2016 by adopting the unpopular view that it's bad that cops can kill black people."
Yeah.
And James Bowie writes, "There's good evidence that a substantial number of Obama-Trump voters made the partisan switch in 2014 and 2015, before Trump entered the national conversation, but during the height of Black Lives Matter." And he's got some anecdotes which go along with that. It's Midwestern voters who voted for Obama that were just upset about the aggressive Black Lives Matter publicity and decided to side with the cops.
Yeah, okay, I could see that.
Right? And then, I'm being alienated from my liberal friends because I just don't agree with them. I think the cops need to be defended. And then Trump comes along, and then they vote for Trump.
Yes.
And it's not because, oh my gosh, people from the southern border are suddenly invading the middle of the country. That's not what made them switch.
Nor did economic anxiety.
This was not economic anxiety either. It was a heavy tinge of racism, but the thing that needs to be acknowledged is that it did make people change their party votes.
Yeah.
And that's not to say Black Lives Matter was wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that abolish ICE is wrong. I'm not saying that. But I'm just pointing out that electoral consequences of taking the proper position sometimes cost you votes. I mean, that's what happened with the Voting Rights Act in 1964 and so on. So we see that now because there's a lot of in Arizona, I guess, for the Arizona governor's race, Daily Kos Elections does a nice piece about this on the front page of the pundit of Daily Kos this morning, that Republicans are running abolish ICE ads against Democratic opponents of the Arizona governor.
Yeah.
Already. They haven't even decided their primary yet. There's two people running.
Mm.
And one says abolish ICE. What I mean by that is the whole immigration system is being inhumane and unfair and has to be completely redone. And the other person running in the Democratic primary says, well, it's really, reform ICE, not abolish ICE. And, of course, the Republicans don't care. They're running ads for both of them saying, these people want to abolish ICE and open up our country and let gangs rule.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. I mean, it's just people need to be aware of that.
Yes.
And so if you have a nuanced stance in terms of what that slogan means, work on it now because you're going to be running against ads that are going to Max Cleland you.
Yes. Well, that's true. And interestingly, I guess in a way it sort of frees you up in the sense of, if you adopt the position and say it's worth the risk, you will be hit with those ads. If you refuse to adopt the position and take the position that, that alienates potential swing voters and I will reject it, you will still be hit with those ads. So the question, I guess, one way of looking at it is, will I firm up a base of support or alienate it, depending on whether or not I simply run away and get shot in the back or run into fire and get shot in the face?
Right. Well, so the Morning Digest from Daily Cost Elections puts it a little differently and says the GOP is hitting Democrats who are wanting to abolish ICE. Here's how to hit back.
Okay.
And then talks about how to do a nuanced response.
Well, then that would be an excellent place to start and see whether it works and in which races they adopt such an approach and keep a close eye on things. But yeah, it's essentially true. You'll be attacked as an abolish ICE person regardless, and it probably would have happened with or without the slogan, to be honest. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think there are some more stories, I'm pretty sure. We had one, at least a big one, saved for after the break. We're at the other side of the break now. What's the news?
What's the news? Has everything changed? No, nothing's changed. So I was looking at Twitter today with people arguing about treason and what's treason anyway, and clarification of the word.
What is treason?
And, of course, you've read this on the air, and the Constitution does have a word or two to say about it. It says treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. So that or part, in other words, adhering to the enemies, giving them aid and comfort. But does that mean that that only counts during war? And, of course, the point really is that treason's been around for a very long time, way before the Constitution.
Yes.
So what does it really mean? Treason is frequently found used in its earliest sense as Merriam-Webster dictionary, the betrayal of a trust. So if you're using treason in the terms of it meaning the betrayal of a trust, that's exactly what Trump did when he went to Helsinki, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, this is, do you mean it literally or do you just take it seriously? Well, go to the dictionary because you actually have a choice. It can mean what you want it to mean.
Right.
Lewis Carroll was right. Words mean what you want them to mean.
That's true. And they may not even mean that.
Right. So the point is that people decrying the use of the word treason are really trying to say, I didn't like Obama and what he did with Iran was bad, so therefore that proves my case.
I guess
you can't call every policy dispute by the leader of the country who's entitled to make policy. You can't call policy disputes treason.
That's,
Of course,
I
there's
mean,
a cottage industry on the right of doing
Right.
exactly that when a Democrat's in power, but that's
yes,
besides the point.
right. Let's not talk about any of that. And of course, you're not supposed to, slash you can't, slash you can if you want to, or if you're from the right wing, or you're white, or any sort of, any number of caveats to all of that. But yeah, you're right. They spent years saying, I mean, they were explicit, signing the healthcare law, treason, because something, we think it's unconstitutional. It was ruled that it wasn't unconstitutional, but that was wrong. And anything unconstitutional, if you do something that's unconstitutional, you're disloyal to the Constitution. If you're disloyal to the Constitution, you're disloyal to the United States. If you're disloyal to the United States, it's treason. And that was the leap that they were willing to make. And I guess, don't ask anybody for their definition of treason unless, or ask if they're using the constitutional definition for treason unless they're calling for Trump's execution. I suppose that will free up a lot of time for you.
Right. 1915, Emily Dickinson had a poem called The Treason of an Accent.
Oh?
The treason of an accent might vilify the joy to breathe, corrode the rapture of sanctity to be. I mean, treason has a lot of different meanings, and you can't own them because I only mean this, and therefore you can't mean anything else.
Okay.
That's not how words work.
All right. Well, then, I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as
treason in an accent. Yeah, I know. But see, the whole point is that you can't own that topic and say, see, I own the libs because they use treason, and now I'm going to show them in the Constitution where they're wrong.
I need a city that rhymes with treason that there could once have been a man from to write my next poem.
Yeah, I suppose. More polling, by the way. Kornacki pointed out yesterday that there's a California 48 poll where Dana Rohrabacher, Russia's favorite congressman, is running. And Harley Rhoda, the Democrat, leads 46, Rohrabacher 43.
Yeah.
And it's historically a GOP district in Orange County that went for Clinton by 2 points in 2016 after going Romney plus 12 4 years ago, earlier than that in 2012. So, the Democrats are still on track to do what they need to do, and I just thought I'd point that out.
Okay.
All right. I promised I gave a teaser right before the break that I was going to talk about Maria Butina.
Yes, her. She's arrested.
She is arrested. And here's the article from Catherine Stewart, which I think highlights something important. And I have an earlier one from April of 2017 from the Washington Post on a similar topic. This one is from the New York Times. What was Maria Butina doing at the National Prayer Breakfast?
Praying, I guess. Eating?
America's Christian nationalists have been finding common cause with the Russian government for a while now.
Yes.
And the gist of it, not to get too deep in the weeds, is that there is a group called the Family that runs the National Prayer Breakfast. They're extremely conservative, and they are trying to get back-channel communications with policymakers in American government. They're basically Christian nationalists, and they really would prefer, or as the Times put it, the fundamental mission is to create a ruling consortium of Christ-centered political and community leaders.
Yay.
Which sounds benign enough, but a lot of this back-channel stuff to the Soviet Union's successor in Russia really has a lot to do with anti-gay, anti-LGBTQ rhetoric and policy.
Yes, that's true. And there's been a lot of effort to try and tie the two together and find common cultural ground between American conservatives and Russian conservatives. And by the way, of course, all over this, the guy who actually literally wrote the book on the Family, Jeff Charlotte, who you can find all over Twitter, talking about just that connection for the past. How many years have we had Twitter?
He's had two books.
Many, yes.
He's in this article.
Good.
And he was tweeting on Monday, and some of his tweets are right there. Lobbyists and foreign governments look forward to the event as a way to meet powerful people without, as Mr. Charlotte has reported, having to go through the State Department and normal vetting process.
Yes, this is a great cover. If you want to get around the vetting process, I'm going to a prayer breakfast. You can't vet people on their way to a prayer breakfast. That's un-American and unconstitutional, and in large part, that has worked. On
October 5th, 2016, with one national prayer breakfast under her belt, Ms. Butina direct messaged a Russian official on Twitter, "We made our bet. I'm following our game. I'll be connecting the people from the prayer breakfast to this group."
Okay, that's collusion.
After the election, Ms. Butina informed someone the complaint called U.S. person number one. That one might be the NRA person, that she would be bringing along some very influential Russians to the breakfast. After the event, which President Trump attended, just as previous presidents have, Ms. Butina emailed one of its organizers to thank him for the gift of his precious time during the National Prayer Breakfast Week and for the very private meeting that followed. A new relationship between two countries always begins better when it begins in faith. Well, this one from the Washington Post in April of 2017 says, "Guns and religion, how American conservatives grew closer to Putin's Russia."
Yeah, that's a big combination. And
that's how she wound up influencing the NRA.
I guess
on issues involving gun rights, terrorism, and same-sex marriage, many leading advocates on the right who grew frustrated with the country's leftward tilt under President Barack Obama have forged ties with well-connected Russians and come to see that country's authoritarian leader, Vladimir Putin, as a potential ally. Again, reminding folks that this is Trump's base, the evangelical part of it, and why he gets so frustrated when people just don't laud him for all the work he's done with Vladimir Putin. After all, his base loves him, and they love Putin, and it's all about this kind of stuff, and how come the fake media isn't telling it like it is? That's, in Trump's mind, what's going on here.
Yeah. The super religious Russians.
The attitude adjustment among many conservative activists helps explain one of the most curious aspects of the 2016 presidential race, a softening among many conservatives of the historically hardline views of Russia. Not people in Washington, but the evangelical base who votes for them. To the alarm of some in the GOP's national security establishment, the article says, support in the party base for then-candidate Trump did not wane even after he rejected the tough tone of 2012 nominee Mitt Romney, who called Russia America's number one foe and repeatedly praised Putin, that is Trump. The burgeoning alliance between Russians and U.S. conservatives was apparent in several events in late 2015 as the Republican nomination battle intensified. And again, that goes back to the other comment I made about the Black Lives Matter. There's a whole lot of things that are intersecting in the same space here. So you have anti-gay, racism, gun rights, authoritarianism, and suddenly, Putin doesn't look so bad.
Yeah, well, I guess the people who are into that particularly weird combination of social issues, yeah. And I guess it's, I don't know whether anybody thinks that the Russians needed any particular help in learning to target on issues. A lot of that stuff, a lot of the confluences.
No, the issue stuff they know. They're experts on the issues. They work with far-right groups in Europe all the time.
Yeah, then that's true. That's where it could come from.
But how to do it, that's a different story. Who to target? How do you know that really it's Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania that you have to, pay attention to?
That's harder to figure out. It's real interesting.
Unless you steal, analytics from the other party, and then you know that's really where the soft parts are.
Well, you wouldn't have to figure anything out then. It's just told to you. Here's the list. Oh, okay, I can handle that from here. But yeah, it's interesting, and I'm glad you brought up the fact that she was at the National Prayer Breakfast, because there was that flap yesterday, that brief moment when everybody thought, oh, that might be a picture of her in the Oval Office.
Right, it was a real picture, non-doctored, non-photoshopped, but it was apparently a staffer who also happens to have red hair.
Yes, and they look somewhat alike. There are a couple of pictures.
Well, she was in the background, and it was you really can't tell. But
you can't tell.
But the reason it became a flap is because it was a reporter who circulated it, and so trusted source, so maybe it's true, that kind of thing. Turned out, it lasted about a half hour.
Yeah, but it wasn't, it's a non-crazy assertion, given that we're also reading about what is she doing at the National Prayer Breakfast? Well, why should she be in the Oval Office? I don't know. What's she doing here? This is also a place she should not be. But she is here.
Well, then there's another part of it, too, which I want to add on. And so Cameron Kasky is one of the Parkland kids who organized March for Our Lives.
Oh, yes, okay.
Tweeted, wait a minute, hold on, this is getting lost in the fire. The NRA was literally colluding with a Russian spy within 24 hours. There's a law that saves them from having to disclose the dark money donors to the IRS. That's a thing that happened, he tweets.
That's true. Over the last 24 hours, that's right.
Right? So a skeptic writes, according to what? Says who? Well, then there's this Fox piece. The government is making it easier for dark money donors to go undisclosed. The IRS will no longer ask the NRA and other nonprofit groups to disclose donors. So that's in Vox.
Yeah.
And the same skeptic says who, yeah? And the Russian spy NRA link? Well, here's the indictment.
She's been arrested, man.
So that says who guy kind of disappears from the thread.
Well, innocent until proven guilty. Okay.
Hey, crickets, where'd this guy go? Hopefully he's researching. Well, I hope he's okay. Thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, true. Good. Yes. All right. Well, they deserve it.
Yeah, exactly. So, the whole interaction here
Thoughts
between
Where's the
right-wing
thought breakfast, by
groups, Christian groups, anti-LGBTQ groups, NRA.
It's hard to keep up with.
You got to get all the letters right.
NRABTQ.
NRBQ.
NRBQ. That's a band. Yes.
Yeah. Right. Our National Labor Relations, NLRB.
Right. That too.
So, but the relationship between all these groups, including the Pepes and all this other stuff,
I forgot about
is stuff that we don't really talk about enough. It makes it sound like conspiracy theory, but it's really not. And so that's why it's helpful to follow experts like Dave Newart and some of the other folks who follow these militias and other groups that have ties like this. And to find out that there's actually a Russian connection, I think, is kind of a big deal, particularly when you realize that this is the base that votes for Trump. And by the way, here is Trump trying to make nice with Putin at the expense of the United States.
Yeah.
So it's been a heck of a 3 days.
Yeah, I mean, it's a terrific thing, finally, to find, the timing couldn't be better to find out that not only was the NRA funneling Russian money, but there's now an arrest of a spy who's so explicitly linked to NRA activities. It's going to taint a lot of money. It's not going to change
It's so
minds
tainted
on
money
guns,
that they're
but-
going to hide it from you now.
Yeah, right. Now they won't disclose who the donors are. But now you're just left in the dark. Well, I don't know who the donors are, but we just arrested a Russian spy.
Federalist.
Yeah, right, true. Well, I guess we'll never find that one out either.
Yeah, we don't know.
Not that we need to know.
Anyway, I wanted to try to tie all this stuff together because it's you start looking over your shoulder a little bit. We were joking about that at the beginning of the show,
Yeah.
but the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of these lines that are all working together. And, is that money going in, for example, to local congressional races on the Republican side? Is that one of the reasons why the Republicans in Congress are so loath to really look at this thing in a serious way? How tainted are they? And it's not, conspiracy theory to start asking those questions, given what we know. NRA gives money directly to Marco Rubio. How much of that is Russian?
All of it fungible. The end.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. That's the legal answer. So, and this was your idea, guys. Money is fungible. I mean, you didn't invent that theory, but that's the theory on which they have built so much of their efforts to defund the left. And now we're watching how the funding is working on the right. And it turns out not only is it paid for by Russian money, but the policy is set by Russian spies embedded in your organization. Good job.
Well, I'm going to leave you with some advice from James Comey.
Oh, I don't know if I like that, but all right.
I don't know if I like James Comey, but listen to his advice anyway. This Republican Congress, he tweets, has proven incapable of fulfilling the founders' design that ambition must counteract ambition. All who believe this country's values must vote for Democrats this fall. Policy differences don't matter right now. History has its eyes on us. This from a Republican.
Yeah, well, nominally true. But he's not the FBI director anymore, so I guess he's free to say these things.
I know, but he's still a Republican. He's free to say whatever he wants, and so that's what he says.
That's true, and he's saying it very high up in the atmosphere. He's 6 foot 400 inches.
Yeah, very, very tall guy. So let's see what else we have here. Oh, here's another interesting thing. Again, just to be practical about this.
Yes.
We not only have the polling, which is favoring Democrats right at the moment, but this is an Alex Rorty piece from McClatchy, which I think is kind of worth paying attention to. We're known to do politics now and again on the show. 'Voting isn't enough. Liberal groups band together to recruit volunteers. A coalition of liberal groups on Wednesday is launching a massive Get Out the Vote effort aimed at helping Democratic candidates during the last days of 2018 midterm election, hoping to give them a final push as the party tries to take the House majority and win a slew of competitive statewide races. The effort is they're calling it the last weekend, and they'll attempt to recruit the largest grassroots army ever assembled before a midterm election, one that will not just vote for Democratic candidates but volunteer for the campaigns. Those who sign up will begin volunteering the Saturday before the election, a critical late juncture for the campaign. The stakes are so high voting isn't enough. And it talks about the fact that these groups who often fight with each other are not fighting over this.
That's good. I hope it holds.
Yeah, I know. Kind of a boring article, but this is the kind of nitty-gritty stuff you have to do if you actually want to win these elections. So I'm very happy it's happening, and I'm just letting your listeners know
I am glad
that people are doing a little bit more than just yelling at Trump on the internets.
That's good, and I am glad about that because I did see in the margins over at the Daily Beast article that we were looking at before, their next read this also. Let's also get you involved and distracted with this side story. One of them hinted that there wasn't enough of this going on, and in particular with respect to the fight against Brett Kavanaugh, and that may be a separate issue in the sense that or they may not. Progressives, it accuses them of being particularly slow to mobilize in that fight, although I don't know exactly what progressive interest groups are going to be able to do beyond, call your congressman stuff, or call your senator would be wiser, of course. But it worried me a little bit. But don't let any of that get you down. There's certainly a lot of volunteer mobilizing happening, and I guess even if you're aiming at the last weekend of the campaign, is that in late October or in early November? I don't know which, but that's got to happen now. You can't wait till after Labor Day to organize that effort, even if you're not paying attention until after then. But this time around, you can't afford to wait until after Labor Day either.
Right. Anyway, with that, I'll end our discussion for today. We'll be back tomorrow. There's going to be even more fallout, I'm sure. But with that, this is Greg Dworkin speaking to my good friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. Did you remember that you were on vacation last week? Does it feel like it?
It does not feel like it. No. I'm having to remind myself of it. And my kids are doing
every once in a while, you just close your eyes and picture where you were, and you get that nice calm for about 2 minutes. And that will fade. The visions won't be quite as as intense, but use them now while you can still remember.
Okay. Well, I'll continue to try and do that and remember how nice it was. And although I knew some crazy things were happening here, and I definitely wanted to keep one eye on things. And
waterfalls, lagoons, icebergs, just keep that in mind.
I learned that word.
Yep.
So,
all righty. Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay. Thanks very much, Greg. Have a nice evening dealing with the treason, and we'll be back to discuss it some more. Joan McCarter assures me she is all set to roll for today. So for those of you who have been waiting to hear from her for the last couple of weeks, you're in luck. You're going to get your wish. And I have a feeling we'll be focused on largely the same sorts of things. Here's something I saw fly by on Twitter that needs some calling out for the show. I mean, it was clearly very well circulated and very widely discussed on Twitter. Tucker Carlson, he's a horrible person, and you should know that. And there are several reasons that I could offer you by way of proof on that conclusion. Many of those also currently circulating on Twitter and elsewhere on the internet because he has offered himself up as a horrible person once again with another horrible example. An interview with Donald Trump, which is all by itself, it was destined for the garbage fire right from the beginning. And a lot of great criticism being leveled at Tucker Carlson personally, and he deserves it. So do take advantage of that. If you don't have a recent vacation to hearken back to and use for calmness and visualization purposes, you can take some solace in the terrific takedowns of Tucker Carlson currently and his entire history. But what I saw called out in particular, Dan Lavoie, how do you say it? Dan Lavoie? How do you say your last name? Lavoie. Someone with better French pronunciation and understanding of the derivation can tell me about that, or including Dan would be a great idea. But Dan is a progressive political communications strategist, according to his brief online Twitter profile. And while there was a lot to be ashamed of as an American in the exchange between Tucker Carlson and Donald Trump, and I can think of few combinations more infuriating than those two side by side, he calls out this clip that is circulating. There were a couple of really disturbing ones, I guess, from the interview. He says people are missing the truly frightening part of this clip, which he includes in his tweet. Tucker and Trump are discussing in this, and I think what was the big outrage in this is basically they sit there and they say, this whole idea of mutual defense, the idea underlying NATO, how stupid is that? Listen, do you realize a lot of people don't realize this. A lot of people don't know this, but NATO is a treaty among countries in the North Atlantic, which is an ocean. That's what the O in NATO is for. North Atlantic Treaty Ocean. And what happens here is, do you know, a lot of people don't know this, but if you do, you're lucky. Do you know that if one of the countries in this so-called alliance is attacked, the other countries, they have to help. They have to help that country. They have to go and fight a war for some stupid country we never heard of, that only because it's in the North Atlantic Ocean. That's the only reason. That's it. And they have this discussion as though this was a new discovery for them. And how horrible is it? And I mean, Tucker Carlson is particularly disgusting in this. And I think, as he puts it in the clip, why... where is the clip? I think it's only a minute long. We're going to take a look at this tweet that has it in there. Can I pause this? I don't know. Do we get in trouble for just playing a minute of it? I don't know. It should be, I think, fair game. Do I have the volume all the way down? Let's try this.
Obligates the members to defend any other member that's attacked. So let's say Montenegro, which joined last year, is attacked. Why should my son go to Montenegro to defend it from attack? Why is that? I understand what you're saying. I've asked the same question.
I'll pause it there, and it's a rather amazing question all by itself. Why should Tucker Carlson, why should my son go? Why not? Of course. In fact, why not you, Tucker Carlson? But why shouldn't your son? Is there something special about your son that if he's in the armed forces, he shouldn't have to go to defend any particular country for any particular reason, much less, don't even bother getting into the NATO thing. Don't even bother getting into the selection of countries that you made. But that's what Dan Lavoie is writing about here. That's what we'll get back to. But just for an extra second, frankly, I have no answer for you, Tucker. Why should your son do? One, how old is your son? Two, has he joined the armed forces? Then I don't think you have anything to worry about. You're talking about what? Being drafted? You have a draft age son? I don't think that's really the particular point here. You probably don't. But if you did, why not? Why not send your son? He's defending freedom. I mean, we entered into these alliances for a reason. And, let me ask you, I guess it raises the question, do you think Tucker Carlson, one, would he have any question about whether or not his son should have gone to defend, to fight in Iraq or Afghanistan? No question theoretically, but would he join the army to do it? No. And were he drafted, I have a feeling all of a sudden Tucker Carlson would be anti-war, which is perhaps why people who are anti-war activists keep saying, ironically enough, that they might back the reinstatement of the draft. But it was a particularly disgusting display, really. And quite honestly, Tucker Carlson is such a bad person that I might go out of my way to watch if his kids were drafted, quite honestly. I don't know anything about the kids, and it's terrible to blame them. So we'll just keep it in the realm of theory. No, honestly, if it really happens, you can't levy, the punishment that Tucker Carlson deserves on the kids, and that's what would end up happening. So you can't actually do that and say that and endorse that. But Tucker Carlson certainly deserves the pain that goes along with it, even if there's only some way to exempt the kids. Although, who knows? Maybe they're horrors in their own right. I don't know how old they are. They could be the biggest bullies in the playground and deserve the same thing. I don't know. We'll leave it up to a panel of a jury of their peers to figure that out. But Tucker Carlson deserves whatever horrific thing might possibly come his way. However, the bigger issue here was Dan's observation about the choice of Montenegro for the discussion. And I thought that was kind of interesting. He says that they didn't choose that out of a hat, and that's not just because we don't think that they have any hats, but because I thought, it might be, that sounds like it's a random thing, and a lot of people probably don't even realize, A, that it was a country, or B, that it was a country in NATO. It's one of the most recent joiners to NATO. But this is an important sounding theory. This might mean something. Tucker and Trump didn't choose Montenegro out of a hat. 3 weeks before the 2016 U.S. election, Russia attempted a coup in Montenegro in order to keep them from joining NATO. Apparently this is considered a major issue over there in Russia, and you can understand as more and more Eastern Bloc and former Eastern Bloc countries join NATO, that worried them a great deal. They probably considered that to be treason enough that they wanted to try to encourage a coup to change the government in Montenegro so that they didn't join NATO. And what he's saying, Dan says here, is that Trump is, with this interview clip, explicitly inviting Putin to try again. And what would Donald Trump do if a NATO member had a coup and tried to leave? Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just as we were exiting for the break, and I don't know if we got it all in there, but the thought that springs from Dan's tweet here is, what do you think the reaction of Donald Trump as Commander-in-Chief, allegedly, of the United States Armed Forces would be if Russia did, in fact, attempt once again to engineer a coup in Montenegro aimed at installing a government that was anti-NATO? I mean, consider that Donald Trump, I think you'd be safe in concluding from his comments over the past, even just the last couple of weeks, but really going back even further, that he's essentially pretty anti-NATO. And he would probably say in a crunch, if he felt like the future of a country was at stake that Americans could instantly be roused to care about for one reason or another. It's big enough of a country that we've heard of it. Say Germany, not Montenegro. And he might feel the pinch there and say, okay, Russia has invaded Germany. That's problematic. I don't think I can survive politically not condemning, at the minimum, the invasion of Germany by Russian troops. But Montenegro, and this has always been a problem. I mean, it's not really, strictly speaking, a Trump generated problem. There's always been people, and they've been Trumps for the most part, but always been people who have said, or have questioned, would the United States really go to war with Russia over an invasion of Montenegro, an outright invasion, even if the question only becomes more complicated when it's a coup, and even more complicated when it's a coup that the Russians likely, I don't imagine if you saw a coup in Montenegro, you would likely see a lot of overt claiming of credit for the coup by the Russians, because why add that headache normally to the situation? However, I do question that, and in these circumstances, I think it might be entirely possible that you might find Vladimir Putin saying, you know what? Let's start hinting that we were overtly responsible, or hinting overtly, speaking overtly, that we were somehow responsible, or that we welcome this coup, and see what that does to American politics, and see whether that forces Donald Trump to use strong language against the Russians, which he has been unwilling to do to date, just to see what he thinks his limits are. That might be an interesting test. I don't know if it's in their long-term interest or not, but prior to Trump's election, there have always been people who have thought, well, what if? I mean, we're pledged to defend NATO nations, and maybe the expansion of NATO, there were people who are, fine in terms of their we have no doubts about their pro-NATO stances, who probably worried a great deal and said, I understand the desire to expand NATO for security purposes. You want as many people and as many countries included in your alliance as possible. And of course, we were at the time anxious to have the help of NATO countries and the troops of NATO countries to fight in Afghanistan, which was an action endorsed by and backed by NATO. They were responding to our, and I don't even know if there was historians know, and probably some of you who followed the situation very closely know, was there an actual, formal Article 5 invocation? Is that right? Is it Article 5? That's my memory. Invocation from the United States saying the United States has been attacked on September 11th, speaking of those attacks, and we call on our NATO allies to join us in retaliating properly for those attacks. Big question mark about whether it was properly done or not, but is that how we found ourselves fighting alongside NATO allies in Afghanistan, or was there some degree less of that, like, well, we don't want to, put you all under the formal thumb of Article 5, but that's the spirit of it, and we're looking for help, and there were probably plenty of countries who would have done so voluntarily. I don't really remember, or I'm not even positive I ever knew exactly what process was used to get NATO allies involved in Afghanistan, but it's very clear. That much I do know. They have been involved, and in significant numbers, and a significant number of NATO forces from these other countries have been killed in service in Afghanistan, and Trump apparently, and Tucker Carlson, thinks, that much of all of it. Why should my son? Well, why should someone's son born in any one of the NATO countries that were then part of the alliance or have since become part of the alliance die in Afghanistan? Or what's the interest of Montenegro in Afghanistan? What is the interest of Canada, for that matter, in Afghanistan? Canadians considered it, and, I think probably rather easily came to the conclusion that we're not any more immune from international terrorist attack as Canada than is the United States. There's, we're not target number one, certainly, but there's no reason to believe that there isn't plenty of grievance against Canada for its support of the United States, or even for direct action in some of these countries. So, they had their own reasons for participating, but certainly that question might have been asked in any one of these countries, just the way Tucker Carlson asked it here, except their conclusion was, well, there's a job to do, and we promised to do it, and we're going to go do it. Tucker Carlson would, of course, turn tail and run and flee to wherever he could with his kids, rather than allow even Donald Trump to deploy them overseas. But this is all part of a larger and very interesting set of questions that we now have to wonder about. Were troops to be deployed to Montenegro in response to a Russian invasion or some sort of Russian aggression? Is anybody 100% certain that the troops would be ordered to act solely in the interest of the United States and not necessarily in the interest of Russia? I mean, that's actually a big question mark here. Part of what has emerged from the last weeks or of activity, and I mean, we've asked this question before, well prior to the Helsinki, whatever you want to call it. It's not a summit, the meeting, the dictation from Putin to Trump. We've asked this before, but more in the context of, well, Trump's crazy and short-tempered and impulsive and can be moved to possible state violence by tweets. And we wondered in the past, sitting in a missile silo with the button, the mythical button to press or key to turn, depending on which myths are based in reality and which ones you believe in. I've not been in any missile silos. I can't tell you what you do, what you turn or push or otherwise manipulate in order to launch missiles. But if you're waiting, your job is essentially waiting for the call that you hope never comes. If it should come one day during the Trump administration, it cannot possibly fail to occur to you that you might be being asked to launch a missile based on Donald Trump's personal pique, a fit of anger triggered by a mean tweet about him. And you might wonder to yourself, I don't know, maybe you can train that out of yourself. I assume that that's been the interest in the armed forces, is training that little twinge of conscience out of people. But mostly you're interested in doing that and interested in complying and training your conscience out because we've had this history of non-impulsive, crazy presidents, as opposed to this guy who might really be moved to nuke someplace over a tweet. But worse than that, in the last week, now we have the question of, suppose you're being asked to launch that missile. Can you, not only are you worried about, is the president just loony, but am I sure who's really ordering this launch? It's the president's voice on the phone, and it might actually be him. He would insist on calling people himself. Listen, I want you to launch a missile. Sir, this is not the designated process. We're very clear about this. It has to go under a very clear and precise authentication process to avoid just these kinds of situations. I need to hear from, I would need to hear it through the chain of command. I'm waiting to hear from my general to give the authentication. I know better than the generals. I'm the commander-in-chief, and you better, I could see him actually see him sitting there on his cell phone insisting somehow, I don't know how he gets the number. Somebody's going to have to bring him the telephone number. Dial this silo for me and then give me the phone. But insisting that they launch and, sir, were you perturbed about something you read on Twitter? I just have to ask. But, now we have to ask, who's asking for this launch? I hear that it's your voice, but did Vladimir Putin tell you to do this? I am not sure. I don't know what to say. I was worried about it, and I did see some people who, said, I'm not upset by the fact. I think the way I put it was, can you be sure any longer, if you're a member of the armed forces or you're that missile silo guy, can you be sure that the orders you're getting are coming from somebody who has the interests of the United States first in mind here? Or is he just passing on orders from Putin? And the real national security danger that this highlights is it calls into question the ability of the United States to project the threat of the use of force anywhere in the world. And, of course, peace activists, naturally will say, maybe that's not an awful thing. And there's a context you can put it in that you can understand why that wouldn't be an awful thing. Would that hamper the ability of the United States, at the behest of John Bolton, say, to launch an attack on Iran or North Korea? And isn't that a good thing? It may be, but it would be totally coincidental because the same problem, the same factors could give rise to a very different kind of outcome and a different kind of problem. Suppose the attack that's being asked for isn't against Iran or North Korea, and that the attack gets launched. We don't know necessarily that the people in the silo would decline to make a launch. So, we can speculate. The best possible outcome is, well, they're asked to launch against North Korea and they opt not to, and it was never justified in the first place, and so it all works out just fine. The worst option is they answer the call and they go through with it because that's what they've been trained to do, and worse still, because there's still going to be people there. John Boltons of the world will be happy that people in the silos went through with their training and launched those missiles as requested against North Korea or Iran. But suppose the launch is targeted elsewhere. I mean, as long as you're contemplating any number of crazy situations, suppose you have a new target, it's Chechnya, or Montenegro, for that matter. They've had a coup, and they're communist, and we got to wipe them out. And who would ask for such a thing? Why would there be a request to launch missiles towards Montenegro? Big question mark. That's weird. Towards Chechnya, if you've been reading the newspapers at all in the time that you spent in the silo, you might be able to figure out, who would benefit from nuking Chechnya? I think I know who might like that. Why would they want us to do it rather than them? I don't know. But the big issue that this whole situation highlights once again is we now have no idea, if you're a member of the United States Armed Forces, if something weird and unpredictable happens and you're asked to deploy somewhere that doesn't make any particular sense to you personally, that's always an issue. It's always been an issue, but there's never been a situation where a fair chunk, a fairly large percentage of the service members would really have reason to to take a pause and say, I don't know that this really makes any sense. Ordinarily, you say, this is above my pay grade, as they like to say, and the president knows what they're doing. Democrat, Republican, or otherwise, not my business. I signed up for this. And there's a hierarchy of national security people and intelligence people and military intelligence people behind this. And even if I would disagree with their conclusion, they know what they're doing. I might be wrong. Whereas now you have to he may have bypassed all these people. This might be because he's angry about a tweet. This might be because Vladimir Putin said, if you don't, I won't give you a hotel or I'll release a P-tape. I don't know if I want to do this for these people. Of course, that puts you, in effect, back on the outcome that Tucker Carlson concluded would be an okay one. So it's a little troubling that we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same position, and we have different reasons for questioning what might be going on, but they all come from the fact that not a one of us believes that the current political situation involves any sort of stability or constancy of thought. Not Tucker Carlson, not me, not you. That's problematic, and it's the sort of thing that the person who facilitates that kind of problem, who exacerbates that level of national security crisis, needs to be removed from office very quickly. Could be considered a traitor, for instance, to United States interests. I don't know. That worries me a little bit. So I'll be staying out of the missile silos for the foreseeable future. And I hope you will too, Joan. Thank you for waiting patiently. Hi. How are you?
Hi.
You feeling good in this atmosphere of, maybe a little treason, maybe not?
Yeah, treason is this week's civility.
Yes, right. You're not allowed to. Yeah, that's right. That's good analogy. We have to pretend we care about the words.
Scout Finch came up with it first.
Well,
I can't claim it.
Okay.
So.
Well, we're all socialists here now, apparently. So you can claim it. It's okay.
All right, cool.
We're all being tarred with the same brush. So,
yeah,
which is also socialist. That's nice too.
Or to call it treason.
No.
And you could argue that nerve gas attacks in a foreign country are sort of, war.
Yes, yeah. A lot of people would say if you're in country A, but you take your weapons and use them in country B and kill people with them, that meets a lot of people's definition of war. and that the people who sent the weapons would be enemies. And if you happen to be involved in, say, a treaty organization, whether or not it revolves around an ocean doesn't really matter. But if the treaty binds you to regarding that as an act of war by the people who did it, I guess now we have a better understanding of why why the president of the United States and Tucker Carlson, for God's sake, all hate NATO for some reason. All now, you might something Montenegro, and it was a great point brought up earlier. That Montenegro might mean something in particular, but okay, how about England?
How about England?
Yeah, or the UK. You can say both United Kingdom or UK. Did you know that? Not a lot of people know that.
Great Britain and England.
Right.
So many names.
It's so
many great
too.
product.
It's right. I wonder what he thinks they make. I mean, he could probably name an English or a British product. But
Stilton.
Yeah, right. That's true. I'm not certain that he would know what that is. Tea, that he could come up with. Well, that's not produced there. They drink it. That's different. Not a lot of tea grown in England. None, zero, I would venture to guess.
I don't know. They grow grapes.
Yes.
For wine.
Yeah. All right. Well,
probably not tea.
Somebody somewhere is probably goofing around in a hothouse, and I grew a tea, bush. What is it? I don't know. What does tea grow on? Bags.
Relatedly, but kind of totally off topic, one of the ways that I have been escaping.
Yes.
It's going back to England on TV.
Oh.
And watching British gardening shows.
Ah. Well,
so I know a lot about British gardening now.
Okay. So you haven't seen it.
You got to have a hobby.
You really do. Otherwise, you could lose your mind. I'm going back. I'm going to go watch Dotard Abbey or whatever they called it. And relax that way. So, I hesitate to ask, how you're doing and all this, although, I hear you found ways to find some solace in the craziness.
I just want to go back overseas. I just want to leave the country again. I'm homesick for Paris. But here we are, and we are dealing once again with Donald Trump and with Vladimir Putin.
Yes. That's a good pronunciation.
This was my favorite thing to see this morning. I just, that's what I was writing about before I joined you. The Russian troll farm company.
Yeah, right. I remember, I can't recall what they called themselves.
Yeah.
Internet
they've
something.
Been indicted by Mueller.
Okay. Yes.
And have put in a motion to dismiss using a quote from Brett Kavanaugh, Trump's Supreme Court nominee.
Well, that highlights a new issue. There you go. That's a great segue into what we're supposed to be focusing on, rather than my stupid tea comments. But yes. So,
back in 2012, the case was Blumen versus the FEC, Canadians were arguing that they, even though they're foreign nationals, they are permanent residents of the U.S., so they should be able to contribute to political candidates.
I see.
And eventually went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said no. Kavanaugh actually wrote with a majority saying, when he was at the circuit court, saying, well, no, they shouldn't, but they can give money, he thinks, to issue advocacy groups. So he's totally in support of foreign money being dark money, going into all of those ads that don't expressly say vote for X.
Yeah.
But, those dark black and white commercials that talk about how horrible somebody is and call them and tell them.
Yes, right.
That money can come from foreigners and be dark.
Why?
So the Russian troll farm.
Yeah.
I'm sure that Putin had a bunch of people going through all of Kavanaugh's everything he wrote once his name was offered. If his name wasn't offered before, who knows? to find what they could use to once again show Trump, show the United States they own us.
That's amazing that they came up with it, and I wonder what that excitement must have been like, among the lawyers there, or whether they, I don't know, do you think they realized it among the Russian side operatives or just the lawyers on behalf of them? Brett Kavanaugh, look, this is great. Is this the guy? Yeah, that's.
I mean, it could have been the American lawyers working on behalf of.
Yes, I would assume.
But how coincidental is it that there's a Kavanaugh quote that they are using as the basis of their motion to dismiss?
That I'm sure that thrilled them to be able to do that. I will say I'm not entirely, I'm open to the idea, for instance, of like permanent residents of the U.S. being able to participate fully in politics, and I don't see any real reason why. If you say, look, this is where I'm going to spend my life, I think you should be able to participate in the politics, and certainly nothing wrong with, if you're going to do it openly and to declare it and to document how much you gave and to whom on the direct to candidate side. Why you would open it up on the dark side, I'm not really sure. And
because you're a Republican?
Yeah, I guess so. But I'm not sure what logic, but none. Why am I asking?
Yeah. Drawing that distinction between money is free speech for individuals, but not for groups, that's problematic in and of itself.
Well, it also, at least it gives us something serious to ask about in hearings and say, why do you think this weird thing happened all of a sudden? That all of a sudden that you're nominated to the Supreme Court and it just so happens that one of your existing opinions could undermine the entire Mueller investigation. Does that, were you aware of that? How do you feel about that? I mean, it's useless to try to pin people down in their hearings because they just lie and then do what they want when they're on the court. But it might make a show of some kind to on television say, is it your understanding that you've been appointed to the Supreme Court explicitly for the purpose of undermining the Mueller investigation? Oh, no, I wouldn't. Okay, I'm just wondering. I figured you would say no.
This just came up, so we were curious.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I mean, a lot of people thought that might be the case anyway because you're a super conservative guy, and eventually the Supreme Court, in some capacity, will be asked, hey, the president really needs to go or needs to be arrested on this charge or something needs to be negated that he's doing because he's insane or a traitor. And
tell us again your thoughts on executive power.
Right. Oh, yes. Well, that would depend on who is the executive and am I on the court?
Right.
Ah, okay. Well, thank you. That's very honest and straightforward. Well, that's a surprise, I think, that came up.
Nothing's a surprise anymore.
I guess.
Particularly if it has anything to do with Russia.
Yeah. Although, it is kind of interesting. Like, Brett Kavanaugh wasn't a surprise pick. And I had heard during the process that he was the favorite candidate of most of the Republican senators, which is interesting. And then there was some question, well, is he going to try and buck the establishment and pick somebody else, or is he going to pick the one that they like? But maybe now we need to ask, well, why was he the favorite?
Perhaps the one that Anthony Kennedy said.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right. Yes, that's another theory that's out there. And was it that he clerked for him? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And,
we don't know that it's a deal made, but it's a little stinky.
I guess so. I mean, I can understand from his perspective.
Anthony Kennedy's kid working at Deutsche Bank in the division that...
Yeah, that's another weird thing.
Isn't it? Donald Trump so much money when no other bank on the globe was willing to.
That's true. That was another weird thing for sure. I mean, I can understand having a little, additional interest in seeing your clerks rise or whatever, but also if you think would be a good judge, that would be helpful, and I'm not certain that's what Kennedy
it's just
thinks
the
of him.
other stuff is kind of
Yeah, but I wonder whether the reason that he became a favorite among the Republican senators is because of his theories on campaign finance. We'll have to dig more into that. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan's still with us. We're talking on our vacation pointers and reminiscing about being out of the country and how pleasant it was to be away from the problems, or to put some distance between us and the problems. But we're back now and having to fight for, regaining control of the country, which the people we met abroad all hoped we would do in short order. Let's see. So,
speaking of Brett Kavanaugh.
Oh, yes. That's what we were doing. I knew there was somebody.
Just popped up on CNN.
Really? What's
Trump
happening?
Supreme Court pick. I would put the nail in ruling upholding independent counsel.
I would what?
Judge Brett Kavanaugh 2 years ago expressed his desire to overturn a 3-decade-old Supreme Court ruling upholding the constitutionality of an independent counsel. A comment bound to get renewed scrutiny in his confirmation proceedings to sit on the high court. Well, yes, as a matter of fact, I think there will be some scrutiny there.
So, independent counsel, which is not what we're dealing with now, but, interesting. I mean, he doesn't say, well, who knows? He may extrapolate when the time is right that, I wasn't thinking that it applied to special counsel rules then, but now that I think about it, I think it does. This whole thing is unconstitutional.
Let's see. He bluntly said he wanted to put the final nail in a 1988 Supreme Court ruling. Decision known as Morrison v. Olson upheld the constitutionality of provisions creating an independent counsel under the 1978 Ethics and Government Act, same statute under which the law expired, replaced by the more modest Justice Department regulation that governs special counsels like Mueller.
Yes.
Mueller, not Mueller. I want to call him Mueller.
Yeah. It's easy to do.
So not exactly the same time, but at the same time relevant.
Yeah. True, and I mean, it's easy enough to extrapolate from one and say, we should, not only should we overturn Morrison v. Olson, but we should go further and say, the president ought to be immune from investigation, period.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could say that. I wouldn't say that. He might say that. And, as we discussed, I think we talked about it rather extensively yesterday and have in the past numerous times. Look, it doesn't matter if it sounds crazy or even is crazy. If you get the system we built, if you get 5 people to sign on the dotted line, and it's not really a dotted line, but if you get 5 justices to say, dumb as it is, that's what we think this case demands, then that's it. It's done. And they can undo it tomorrow if it turns out to be unfair to somebody they like, and then reinstate it the day after if they find somebody that they don't like that they can apply it to. You shouldn't do this. We hope you won't. There's all sorts of judicial canons that say you really shouldn't, and it's bad for the country. But what do they care? Can they? That's all they're interested in. The answer is yes. There might be no such thing as law. Sorry.
Yeah.
But What can you do? That's the system you built for yourself. And you all love the Constitution, don't you?
And come back, win the Senate.
Yes.
And add a few more judges.
Yeah. I mean, no one says you can't do that either. It's funny how all of a sudden, oh, that's outrageous. That's court packing. And everybody knows it's a bad idea. Why do we know it's a bad idea? You learned it in history that FDR proposed it and then backed away from it. Okay. I mean, because he got what he wanted out of the court.
Right.
So I'm not sure it's a bad idea. I mean,
I'm probably more inclined to want to impeach them, but that'll be hard.
Yes, that won't be.
So the more expedient move probably would be to add a few more justices.
Probably true, and doesn't
they should be impeached?
Yeah, they should. Some of them.
None of Trump's appointees should be allowed to stay in their seats.
Mm-hmm.
If we dispose of Trump as we hope to.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues. I know a lot of people bring that. If we were to, I don't know what. I mean, there's nothing about impeaching Trump that necessarily triggers the removal of any of his appointees, obviously. I don't know how obvious that is to everybody, but there isn't anything. But you
can make it.
Yeah, I mean, you can go
because
right
it doesn't
ahead
exist
and
now.
say,
Doesn't mean there's not room to create it.
Well, that's true. And I suppose if you were to impeach Trump and get general agreement such that you were able to remove him from office on the grounds that his election was never legitimate, that would create something new. We've not run into that before. No one's ever alleged that and prevailed. And we may not here, but it does raise a bunch of interesting questions. And as long as there's no such thing as permanent law, go for it. Assert these things. That's okay. What do you have to lose? People will tell you you're crazy, but you know what? If you say something reasonable and temper your speech, they're going to say, my strategy was to say you were crazy. So here we go. You're crazy. So it doesn't matter.
Right.
You might as well go for it, I say.
Can you get too extreme in response to what we're seeing right now? Yes, you can. Physical violence would be too extreme. Yeah. For our side, their side is...
Oh, that's, run of the mill.
Okay with it on the fringes.
Yes. Which
aren't so fringy anymore.
Right. Some of those fringes are former White House officials.
Yeah.
And I read that during the president's brief stay in the Great K, or whatever you call it, that Bannon was saying, British conservatives ought to take up arms to force Brexit through. I don't know whether he, I'm sure if he were questioned about it, say by British authorities who would say they're not shy about that. They don't have the same protection. He wasn't in the UK, I guess, when he said it, but that's the sort of thing that can get you in quite a bit of trouble, and it's difficult to find your way out of that trouble in the UK. I think we should take up arms against the government right here, right now. They could hold you, and as an American, you would say, "I have rights," and you say, "No, that's over there. You guys established those rights. You fought us bitterly over, the ability to establish those rights because we didn't recognize them, and we still don't. So you're under arrest, and that's just the way it is." But yeah, I mean, that's the sort of thing.
By the way, speaking of the Great K,
yes,
Vote Leave has been fined and referred to the police for breaking electoral law.
Yeah, that's interesting too.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal for them, although it is, we've seen, it happens from time to time, even here. Okay, well, they're fined. Big deal. But I don't know what it's like over there. I guess it's a big shocker. Campaign fines are kind of standard practice here in the United States. Oh,
right.
we got fined? You're kidding. No way. How about we don't pay?
Yeah, it seems to be a bigger deal for them.
Yeah.
And it's coming in really interestingly at the time when May is sort of teetering in her position, when nobody is happy with her
Yes.
on Brexit.
And they have a
primarily.
system whereby you can actually get yourself booted in midstream. We don't have that.
Oh, we need that so desperately.
Yeah, sometimes that would.
I'd
feels like it
also
would be convenient.
really like to have question hour.
Oh yeah, well, that's an amazing thing.
That's my
And-
favorite part of C-SPAN these days.
Oh yeah,
When they
watching
switch
them.
over to Parliament.
And they have their question hour, and they have to answer. And sometimes they dodge, but I like that they shout at one another. That's good. You know, that's why are we always? How did we go on about all this civility stuff in all this time, and we didn't answer? Look at PM's question time in the British Parliament. Surely nothing could be more civil than British accented parliamentarians. Right? One of them's got a wig. That's as civil as it could possibly get. Have you seen the chair that they're sitting on? You see the mace they've got? That's as civil as it gets. They are screaming at each other, booing. Fantastic.
It is absolutely fantastic.
And Americans would love it. Yes. Right. Americans would love it. It's like professional wrestling for politicians.
The C-SPAN would get even more viewership.
Even more. 4 people.
I would love to hear the call-in shows on C-SPAN if we had that.
Yeah, that would be something.
All right. We've fallen down another rabbit hole. What else would you like to discuss?
Gosh,
we can
I don't know.
talk Brett
Rabbits.
Kavanaugh. Till the cows come home. We could talk Brett Kavanaugh and pre-existing conditions for one.
Oh, well, yeah. Why don't we on that front, guys? I don't know that. I don't know the story. I don't know where. I assume he thinks everybody should die. And quickly,
He's had a few
Why?
rulings on the Affordable Care Act.
okay.
And he's not been one of the completely abolish it. It's again where he's been kind of careful, like he was on this campaign finance thing, narrowing it. And one of the arguments he made in one of the cases was that he thinks that the executive should be able to decide when provisions of a healthcare law like the Affordable Care Act are unconstitutional, regardless of what the courts have said.
Why?
Which is kind of a loopy thing to say.
For a guy who serves on the courts.
Who wants to be on the Supreme Court justice?
Huh.
On the Supreme Court justice, I'm having one of those word days. I apologize.
I like what you're having
for
too.
a writer not to be able to put words together.
You had just the right terminology for what was happening to you too. I'm having one of those word days.
Trump is doing this to me. So that takes us directly to this loopy case that 11 states have brought, saying, okay, so we're not doing the individual mandate anymore, which isn't actually repealed from the law. It's just that in the tax law, they're not collecting the fines anymore.
Right. Okay.
It still is there in the statute. It's still there on paper. It just doesn't have any force anymore because the IRS, under the new tax law, doesn't have to collect the fines. It's kind of weird.
Right, yeah.
But anyway, they say because that happened, the whole foundation of the law is undermined, and whoops, basically all of this stuff should be repealed.
Wow.
The brief that the Trump administration filed doesn't go quite where the states went, but it does specifically say you can't have the pre-existing conditions protections, along with a few others, anymore because the mandate isn't being enforced. So pre-existing conditions protections are thereby unconstitutional.
Oh, all right.
Kavanaugh is on record saying, yeah, that's something that the president gets to decide, no matter what the courts say. So, yeah, having him on the Supreme Court might be a little bit of a problem because I expect we're going to see this case advance to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and I don't know what to make of it. Is that supposed to be humbling in some way? Well, look, I'm not power hungry. There's plenty of power that the Supreme Court currently holds that I'm willing to cede to the executive, which is not a good idea. But it's not that I'm trying to accrue power to myself. So therefore, you must think I'm honest. I don't think it's quite that overt and a play. But what would be the reason why a judge would say deciding the constitutionality of, the final decision on whether something's constitutional should fall to the president? That doesn't have anything to do with the structure of our Constitution.
No.
I'm not sure why that is of interest to anybody who's been educated in anything.
How a D.C. Circuit Court judge is saying that? It was a really weird thing.
That the president could offer the opinion, that the president could execute policies such that such that he gave effect to his decision that it was, in his opinion, unconstitutional. All would be permissible. But if a suit made it all the way to the Supreme Court, how the court could possibly say, well, I don't know, a decision on the constitutionality of a statute, I think that's already been done. That guy alone did it. So now, well, that's good news. The constitutionality questions can be decided by a court of one. So if we can never confirm another Supreme Court justice ever, for whatever reason, or we impeach them all, we don't have to have any. We have to have just one person.
This guy on executive power is pretty scary.
That's an odd thing to... It's an odd thing to advocate for, just as a judge in particular, but really never... I mean, there's not a school kid in America who, assuming any of them retain any of what they're taught, who would say, who decides whether laws are unconstitutional? The president. That's the sort of thing that, if you're videotaped saying it to an on-the-street reporter on the Jimmy Kimmel show, everybody says, boy, Americans are dumb. You can't find America on a map? No. Who decides whether things are unconstitutional? The president. Ha ha ha. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. I'm actually going to put you on the Supreme Court. You're a genius and a scholar. Oh, maybe we should test Kavanaugh with a map in the hearing. I don't know if you've seen that clip circulating on Twitter, but very popular one from the Jimmy Kimmel show. Typical thing that they used to do on those late night shows, right? Put people on the street and interview them and show them a map of the world and said, name any country on this map.
Oh,
it's
so depressing.
I know. I'm sure that I would love to see the outtakes of that. The United States? Oh, damn. Yeah, okay. Thanks. Next. But not as entertaining as the fact that there are people out there who are like, can't do it. Literally, the map of the world. Name a country. Got me. Are you in one now? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know what. Maybe they're not dumb. Maybe they're philosophers. Well, who can really say for sure? With Trump in office, I don't know if I'm in a country. I can't tell you. Ooh, interesting point. Hadn't thought of that, but yes.
Okay,
that's
bro.
Unusual.
This is depressing.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to do that. But, okay. Well, that's just a very unusual approach to everything. I mean, much more than just healthcare, but I'm wondering whether there's something really behind it, or is it just, boy, do I hate this healthcare law.
Boy, do I hate this. This is, here I'm finding the quote that I've got it. It's
like, why not just
Dubin wrote it back in 2012. He wrote it up. Late last year, this is in 2012, a 3-judge panel of the D.C. Circuit Court voted 2-1 to uphold President Obama's health care reform known as the Affordable Care Act. Kavanaugh dissented, primarily on the ground that the lawsuit was premature. In a 65-page opinion, Kavanaugh appeared to offer some advice to Republicans who were challenging Obama in this election year. Under the Constitution, Kavanaugh wrote, the president may decline to enforce a statute that regulates private individuals when the president deems the statute unconstitutional, even if a court has held or would hold the statute constitutional.
Okay. I don't know if that's whether he means that should be the final outcome of it, or that it's not itself unconstitutional for the president to disagree with the holding of the court, and he may find himself back in front of the court again for a ruling to the contrary. I guess that's how I would explain it in the hearing. But I mean, I don't know why.
Still
he
not
didn't
how
just
it
say,
works.
Yeah, I don't know why he just doesn't say, as long as I'm dissenting and it doesn't matter. Why write 65 pages about that when you can just say, look, I think this whole law is unconstitutional and I just disagree with the other two. And since it's a dissent, no one's really going to look that deeply into why I think so. I just do.
Until I'm, well, not even when I'm nominated to the Supreme Court, because they're not going to ask me about that. And I'm auditioning for the Supreme Court. I don't have to answer their questions. Yeah. That's how it works.
Right. That's true. I would have kept the dissent to a minimum then. There's less for them to ask about. But these guys are convinced of their own brilliance, so it's very hard for them to stop.
65 pages. They're going to get another one of those on the Supreme Court, just like Gorsuch.
That's good. That's not good for the Paperwork Reduction Act, but it'll keep their clerks busy.
Yes. So that was sort of a scary thing for him to write, commit to paper.
Yeah.
Is this on laws he just doesn't like? Or is this across the board? That the executive gets to pick and choose what part of the law it follows. What part of the law it implements.
And I wonder whether, if he were to find himself on the Supreme Court and find himself in disagreement about the conclusion, like let's say a Democratic president says, I think this part of the law is unconstitutional, I'm not going to enforce it. I mean, is that something that he say, well, okay.
Does it count when it's a Democrat?
Well, I guess,
good question.
That's the ultimate question. Well, you're allowed to say that, but can you issue a writ of mandamus, as they taught us back in law school? Can the Supreme Court order you? I understand that it's your opinion that this is unconstitutional. However, we say it is, and so you have to do it, or does he really mean it? Like, no, he can just say, I don't care what anybody says. I'm going to veto. I'm going to have a line item veto after the fact.
Yeah. Which essentially this is.
Yeah. Which is, has been unconstitutional.
And that also applies to Medicaid right now. Also under suit, and Medicaid expansion and adding work requirements. We had the first decision coming down at the state level in Kentucky, federal courts, but the court overseeing Kentucky saying, no, it does not fulfill, it doesn't meet Medicaid statute as written to impose work requirements on people. That will probably also work its way up to the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Where will Kavanaugh say, well, yeah, the executive gets to interpret Medicaid statute however it feels like?
That would be an interesting twist on it. Not only does the executive get to say this affirmatively expressed statute is unconstitutional, so therefore I won't enforce it, can the executive also say, well, someone should have written this law and didn't, and the fact that they didn't write this law and pass it is unconstitutional. So now there's a new law.
I think in that...
I hope he wouldn't go that far, but what do I care?
I think he wouldn't go that far, but like they like to say, I think it's a slippery slope.
True. Well, everything seems to be. It's a very popular phrase.
Yes.
I notice the more people use it, it just keeps happening over and over again. It's like it's a slippery slope itself, the use of the slippery slope phrase.
And it's Russia.
Yes, they're doing it. That's why they're planting it in all our conversations. Oh, I don't know. Well, let's see. There's a few minutes we can cram in another thing or two, or perhaps a teaser about something coming up. Nothing happening in D.C. at the moment, I don't think. Except, I guess, preps
not a lot happening in D.C. Actually, back to Russia.
Oh, okay. That's like D.C.
There's a new fight in the defense authorization bill. House Republicans put in a sort of a rule at the behest of the Pentagon that undermines Russia sanctions. It gives the president, the Pentagon, the authority to say, well, this nation that we're dealing with promises us they're going to stop buying weapons from Russia. So we can continue to aid them because they promise that even if they're still buying their weapons from Russia.
I see.
The Senate did not include that rule, so they're going to be fighting that one out, I think, hopefully, in conference.
Okay.
So there's that.
That's interesting. That doesn't seem, it's probably not even all that far out of keeping with other practices. We've certainly excused a lot of garbage before, but usually because they're buying our weapons.
But, it's undermining the Russia sanctions that Congress just approved a year ago.
Right. And now they,
because of election interference.
Right. Which we no longer believe in.
No.
So.
Well, maybe we do.
Oh, if necessary.
Wait, this morning we don't again, right?
I don't think so. I don't know. I have no reason to believe we wouldn't, I think. I'm not sure.
He tweeted something, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. What?
Yeah, I think we're back to not believing.
Oh, backtracking from his corrections.
Which was totally believable.
Yes, right. I don't know, what a mess.
2 letters and an apostrophe. Anybody could make that mistake.
Yeah. I mean, totally changed the meaning, but whatever. I don't know. All right. Well, I don't think we should necessarily depress ourselves any further.
No, we shouldn't. We should go to the front page of Daily Kos and we should give some money to Stacey Abrams.
All right. That sounds uplifting.
First black woman who's going to become governor of Virginia. Not Virginia, Georgia.
I'm
sorry.
Hey, wait a minute. You're kidding.
Between Georgia and Virginia. I apologize.
I just was, I've been out of it, but okay. Did she move? Did I miss something? Okay, Georgia, yes. That makes much more sense. Because that's where she lives.
Yes.
Okay, I would be for that. And look, positive action at this point.
Positive action.
Yes, absolutely. And so always an easy place to go if you're just feeling like, oh my God, all these things that are happening. I got to do something. I got to stop stewing. I know a website where you could go and find out about all sorts of positive actions you can take. And sometimes they're real easy.
And it's not always money.
Right.
It's easy. It's signing your name to a petition. It's making a phone call. Yeah. It's volunteering for a campaign. Right. Lots of things that you can do right there from the action button.
Yes.
At the very top of the page at dailykos.com.
And I would recommend it. It's therapeutic, plus it actually does something and helps. And if you're the kind of person that feels like something has to happen here in order I got to get my mind off the worry and I have to take a positive step, there's any number of options there. And it's probably something you could do daily as an affirmation to get yourself started. It's
an important part of self-care.
Yes.
We all need to be trying to.
I mean, that's real
these days.
Sure. Absolutely. And a great reminder that that's there for you. And it's not just about, we're hitting you up for money again. This is a way, and not only just money, but a real way to say, all right, I'm taking control here of my life, even in a small way, if just for a second, to refocus my brain about getting something done. So thanks for that reminder. I appreciate it.
You are welcome.
So do all the candidates. Thanks for joining us. And
you are welcome.
We'll try and stay on an even keel, even if we do that by spending 40 minutes commiserating once a week. That's therapeutic.
We're all in it together. That's an important thing to remember too.
Yeah.
We're not alone.
Okay, right. Well, we all have the same feelings, but we also can suggest ways out of the high dudgeon as well, and any low dudgeon you might happen to have lying around.
Low dudgeon too.
Any dudgeon you've got could be my dudgeon too. Thanks, Joan. We'll see you next week. The rest of you, exercise some self-care over at dailykos.com as she suggests. And we'll be back for a progress report once again next Wednesday. Thanks again, Joan. Take care and stay tuned for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Next up with Justice Putnam. And let's see, what do we got here? Oh, look at this. It's going to be delicious. A delicious selection of news stories here, which he's calling Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Because, you know, cookbook and speakeasy. Anyway, do stay tuned. Lots of things happening. You'll want another take on all of this, but one that comes from a familiar and comfortable place. That's what we do here. Yes, sometimes we rattle the cage. Yesterday was kind of a weird exploration of things. We'll be back on that in no time, I am sure, as Friday rolls around, and then we'll see whether maybe we can get Armando involved in shaking your confidence in the judicial system to its foundations.
From Daily Co's Radio
well.
on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
So we'll be back tomorrow. Greg Dworkin will join us one more time before we close out the week for our Thursday show. Keep an eye on what Maria Butina is onto. And yes, do take a look over at Jeff Charlotte's writing on the family and C Street. There is something seriously weird about using the prayer breakfast as cover the way they do. Don't lose sight of it.